identity series, Who Am I? Next week, July 7th, we're going to start a new series called Global Vision. Really looking forward to that. We'll take a week break from that on July 14th, and we'll do our formal elder installation. Okay, so we got Don Carter, we got Rick Walesa, Jeff Gustafson, and myself. We're going to be installed as elders to provide pastoral care, oversight, and direction for our congregation. Leadership is not just a one-man show, right? It's a team endeavor. So we're going to install that team to be servants of this church for the next. This first term will be a year term, and so that will be our formal time of doing so. Bill Wilson, network leader for all the churches in Oregon, will be here for that morning. He'll minister the Word of God to us, and then he will conduct that installation service. So July 14th will be an important day in the history of Generations Church. All right, we're rebuilding. We're doing new bylaws, structures going into place, leadership. Okay, so a new day is dawning. Okay, so July 14th, please let's gather together for a great morning there. Then we'll be back at this Global Vision for the 21st and 28th. We're going to hear from missionaries from 3 different continents. Okay, 3 different Sundays, 3 different continents. We're talking about Asia, Africa, South America, and then so we're going to start July 7th with Joel and Amy Slater. They're going to be talking to us about their work in Malawi, the continent of Africa. Great family, and this is just a good way for us to be reminded that God is doing amazing things all over the world, and we belong to something big. We belong to a global family. And it's not just what's happening here in Gresham, what's happening here in Generations. We got brothers and sisters all over the world, and people are doing some amazing, creative, and unique things. So this is a good chance for us to be inspired and to be reminded of what God is doing worldwide. So that will be our July. So today is our final installment of our identity series. It's been our series for the month of June. Who am I? Like I've been telling you every week, we, especially in America, are growing up with the notion, we're constantly told that you are one of a kind. God, when God made you, He broke the mold. You are just so unique. There will never be another you again. However, being fed that notion, we think, oh, I'm one of a kind. Who is that? Who exactly is that? There's no template. There's no model. I'm just supposed to create this one of a kind identity. And so we go looking and hunting and searching for who that one of a kind person is. And it's been really the intention of this series to say that you don't have to go looking very far. Because God has given you 4 marks of identity: name, age, race, and gender. And if you want to know who you are, start by embracing those 4 things right there. Think about it. Those are things that have been given to you. Name, age, race, gender. Embrace them. And start working out from there to distinguish yourself and your identity. But start with what you're given. Name, age, race, and gender. So today we're talking about gender. Gender identity. And our culture is suffering. Really the thing that caused us to go in this direction is the current climate in our country. There's an identity crisis going on. And I don't know if there's anything more patently, more emphatic than this issue right here. Gender identity. Now, there's a lot to say about this subject. And I probably won't do it justice. Kind of like last week, race is a huge topic. Gender is a huge topic. Okay, so I might not cover everything as much as it deserves. However, these are just introductions. These are just the beginnings of conversations. And so we're just putting our foot into a whole big world. And this issue here today may even be bigger than that last week, although last week's was big. But I do believe I have some fundamental things to say or to offer as we endeavor to think well on this subject of gender identity. You know, the church cannot afford to ignore this issue. This is huge. If the church wants to stay relevant, if any church wants to stay relevant with the needs of the day, we need to talk about this. If we don't talk about this in this space, we're going to get it, and our children are going to get it, or going to get it from other places. And if they don't hear it in the home, and if they don't hear it in the church, who's going to be shaping their thought on this matter? So we're going to bring this into this space and talk about this issue because we're in the people business. And people are facing these issues and trying to sort through these things. And if they are dealing with this confusion, then we need to address it because we are in the people business. So we can't like just dismiss it and say, culture is going down the tube. No, these are people dealing with real questions and real issues, and if we don't take it seriously, we will miss opportunities to contextualize the gospel for our day and for our generation. So it's imperative that we visit these topics from time to time. Today is June 30th, and this month has been recognized as National Pride Month. I don't know if you've seen that in the news or not, but it's all over media. It's a month designated to stand against discrimination and violence toward the LGBT community. Now, you probably already know, but LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Our particular interest today is on the fourth letter. It's on the T. Because we're talking about gender identity. The first three letters have to do a little bit more with sexual attraction. That's the lesbian, gay, bisexual. But today we're talking about gender identity. Transgender, the T here, is actually a term used to describe people who feel like their true gender does not match the gender they were assigned at birth. Transgender. And the two questions we're going to explore today are these. How does a person decide what gender they are? And how does a person accept what gender they are? How do you decide? How do you accept? So that's going to be the framework of our time this morning. How do you accept? How do you decide? So first, let's talk about the first one. How does a person decide what gender they are? Is it biologically determined? Is it socially constructed? Is it personal preference, or is there an authoritative word in that? Because there is a lot of confusion going on right now. Who am I? My feelings don't match what society thinks my gender should be. I don't feel like I fit. I feel like I'm out of sync. I feel like I'm out of alignment. I feel like I'm in the wrong body. And since there's a lot of confusion, there's been a proposal that perhaps gender is not fixed, but fluid. They call it gender fluidity. So it's a proposal that really rejects the idea that gender is binary. Binary distinction is the idea that male is on one end and female is on the other end, and there's like north and south pole, and that would be called binary. Okay, male or female, two options, binary. So if a person claims to be non-binary, it means they fall somewhere in the middle. Not strictly male, not strictly female. I'm non-binary. That's what that means. If you hear that term, that's what that means. Non-binary. And if you're non-binary, it means that you're not fixed, but you're fluid. It means you can fluctuate back and forth, up and down the spectrum, depending upon the situation of life. Now, if it was a matter of choosing between a male, female, transgender, that would be one thing. But because of this notion of gender fluidity, there is an innumerable array of options. Do you know that you can, on Facebook, you can customize your gender 58 different ways? It's not just male and female. You can actually go on there. There's a little drop-down menu, and there's 58 different options. Now, this isn't a Facebook thing. They're just trying to accommodate the culture. This is what culture is saying and doing, and so Facebook is just trying to accommodate what's happening. So, here are all the options. And so you can see that our cultural lexicon is expanding and growing. And then you have the whole set of pronouns that come with it. So you have a whole new declension of pronouns. So you can see that our vocabulary is expanding. There's so many options. How does a person decide? That's the question. This is where the Bible comes in. I believe we are not on our own in trying to figure these things out. As Christians, we have to approach this from a biblical perspective. The Bible doesn't necessarily answer or directly address all these issues and questions, but I do believe that the Bible gives us enough material to ascertain God's heart on any matter. And to figure out God's intent for people, you really got to go back to the beginning. Because gender theology is rooted within a creation theology. If you want to know the intent and purpose of anything, you got to go back to the beginning. So I'm gonna share a verse here that I think is just so, listen guys, so critical for us to really make sense of what's happening in our culture in this conversation. You see the complexity and you see the confusion, and I think this verse is foundational for us to really get a hold of what we ought to think on this matter. It's in Genesis 2:7. And I got it up on the screen here. Now I'm going to have to read through this. This is really key, okay? Let's grab a hold of this. So Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 says this. The Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. What are humans composed of? There's two components. Okay? You see it? Dust and breath. Bring those two things together, bam, and you have a living being. Dust and breath. Dust we know is body, material. And breath we know as the soul, or the immaterial component of who we are. We are made of material and immaterial components. Bring those two things together, bam, and that's who we are. Human. A fully integrated person. Body and soul equally participate in what it means to be human. Body and soul integrating. Think of the word integrity. comes from the word integris, meaning whole. Not just talking about one part or the other part, but you put the parts together and you have the whole thing. So God integrated us, body and soul, dust and breath, and we became a living being. So God in the beginning, in Genesis 2:7, integrates the self. However, in secular society, what we're seeing is that secular society or culture tends to disintegrate the self. It tends to separate body and soul. Who are you, or who you are, isn't necessarily who your body says you are. That's kind of what the culture is saying. The person or the soul, the spirit is authentic self, and the body kind of takes a back seat. Why should my body have anything to say about who I am? My body tells me that I'm a man, but my soul identifies as a woman. What counts is not my body, but my thoughts and my feelings. The body is irrelevant. In other words, the body does not matter. Jessica Visvano, a male to female transsexual, produced this Kickstarter page. Oh, wow. Jessica Savano produced this page to raise money for her documentary, his documentary, because she wanted to make his life, into a story. She called it, so this is a male to female, they call it MTF, male to female. She wanted to call the story of her life, I Am Not My Body. And as I looked at this little video, it's about a 10-minute clip, she kept saying this in the video, I am not my body. I am a spiritual person. Do you see the disjunction? Do you see the fragmenting effect that this kind of secular thinking has on the human personality? The radical divide, this dualism is kind of the new Gnosticism. It's the Gnosticism of the 21st century. Spirit and matter are two different realms. Spirit is reality. Matter is something to overcome. Matter is a hindrance. Matter does not matter. This has led us to denigrate the body. However, the Bible holds a high view of the dignity and the significance of the body. It's equal in participation with the human experience. And the Christian hope is based on bodily resurrection. He's not just disregarding the body. No, he's coming back for the body, and it's going to be part of the new heavens and the new earth. We will be in new bodies. We will be embodied. That was the original intent for mankind, is that we would occupy spirit, soul, breath, and dust together as an integrated person. That's who we are. That's what we are intended to be. And he will not forsake that original intent. Bodily resurrection is what the Christian faith is, what the Christian hope is based upon. Bodily. Therefore, we respect and honor the body. So the question is, how does a person decide what gender they are? I would say this. Look to the body. Look to the body. What does the body have to say on this? Can we treat the body as legitimate? Does it have something legitimate to say? I think it does. God made it. After all, God made the body. Last week we looked at Psalm 139. I think it's a very applicable passage again to this week's topic of gender identity. God made the body. And Psalm 139 expands upon what we find in Genesis 2:7. Genesis 2:7 says the Lord God formed the man of the dust of the ground. And Psalm 139 is just an expansion upon that same ideal in Genesis 2:7. And it says this: For you, speaking of God, for you formed my inward parts. You formed me. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. Wonderful are your works. You formed me. You knitted me together. Verse 15 says, my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. I like that. You were intricately woven down to the genetic code. That's fascinating. So the question is, and really this is a big question, does the genetic code reflect fluidity, or is it fixed? The genetic code is fixed. You know, outside of some genetic mutations, but even the genetic mutations is fixed. Nothing in the genetic code is fluid. It's fixed. It's either XX outside of the mutations. It's XX and XY. XX meaning male, XY meaning female, and we are not at liberty to overlook our biology. And as Christians, we are not at liberty to overlook the Bible. Genesis 1:1 says, or not 1:1, 1:26 says, male and female, he created them. There are only two options, two possibilities, male and female, and God put his stamp of approval on it all, and he says, including binary distinction, and he said, it is very good. It's good. This is creation theology. Gender theology ought to be rooted in creation theology, and God called binary distinction very good. If you think about this series, name, age, race, and gender, all of these marks of identity have been given to you, have been assigned to you. And 3 of the 4 are biological. Age, race, and gender is written into your genetic code. So how does a person decide what gender they are? And again, I say, look to the Bible. God has formed you. God has fashioned you. It has something to say in who you are. But then there's this second, more important question, at least for ministry. A more useful question to answer for ministry, and it's this. It's the second one. How does a person accept who they are? The first one's kind of logical. Okay, how do you decide? Okay, that kind of talks to the head. But this question here talks to the heart. Because there's real feelings that go on in the whole realm of gender identity, and we don't want to skip through that. We can't just answer the questions of the head. We have to also address the questions of the heart, and I believe this one does. How does a person accept the gender they are? Because there's real emotional pain surrounding this issue. There are people who feel that their true gender does not match what their body says they are. This is called gender dysphoria. Very important. If you want to minister to somebody in this realm, it's called gender dysphoria. And it's this disjunction between psychology and biology. I feel one way, my body says that I'm not. It's dysphoric. I'm out of alignment with who I am bodily. And this requires compassion. Can you imagine the anguish of going through something like that? You guys probably know of Bruce Jenner. Bruce Jenner was an Olympiad, 1976. I mean, I remember growing up with this guy. He did the decathlon. He won the gold medal, 1976. I mean, talk about an athlete. And I looked at him. I thought, man, that's a cool guy. I mean, he's everything I'd like to be. Well, apparently he was suffering from gender dysphoria from a young boy. Long stretches of time, he grappled with it, with the issue of, I'm in a man's body, and I don't feel like I fit. I don't feel like I'm matched. So he would go like long stretches of time with these like really pressing questions. And then he had the 1976 games. And he did well. Gold medal. It kind of just masked the feeling for a time. And then after he won the gold medal, he went back to normal life. And for like the next 10 years, some of the things I saw is that he just like lived in isolation, dealing with these things. He lived by himself on the mountains of Malibu, overlooking the ocean in torment, wondering, why have you made me this way? And then he gets married. And he has children. And then the years of just raising children, being a father, being a husband, and again, it's masked the feeling. And then afterwards, he went into this long stretch of, again, anguish, dysphoria, before finally transitioning in 2015 as a woman. I ran across this gal here on Instagram. You can throw up that next slide. She's in the process of transitioning to a male. This is what her tagline says. May 1st, 18, and you can see that little image there. It means she started her hormonal treatment to transition to a male. Give her hormone blockers, and then give her some testosterone so that she can start to develop a kind of a manly features. Then February 17th, you have this image here that indicates that's the day she went in for the actual transition. And in March, she showed a picture of herself with a bandage on her torso. She just gotten out of surgery. They call it top surgery, double mastectomy. And she showed a picture of herself with this caption. At the bottom it says, "Free at last." She felt as though she were trapped in the wrong body. These are real feelings. Gender dysphoria is when your feelings and body are out of alignment. But let me say this. Gender reassignment surgery is not the answer. It's a superficial treatment. This thing is just cosmetic surgery, is all it is. Because you can improve or alter the body, but the genetic code remains the same. So I would encourage anybody who would ever be contemplating something like this, do not mangle the body in order to bring it in alignment with your feelings. This is called body care. Take care, be tender to the body. This is part of the image of God. This is part of who you are. Don't mangle the body. To bring it in alignment with your feelings. But I'm going to say this as well. Don't mangle the feelings to bring it in alignment with your body. Your body it's not all about the body. Be tender with your soul. Be tender with your body. Be tender with your soul. So the question remains, how does a person emotionally accept what gender they are? How do you decide? Look to the body. How do you accept? And I would say you got to look to the Lord. You got to look to the Lord. You got to do business for Him. You got to go and you got to. And this Psalm 62 says, "Trust at all times, O people, pour out your heart before the Lord." God is our refuge. Pour out your heart. Psalm 142:2 says, "Pour out your complaint before the Lord and tell Him your trouble." So what do you do when you get an affection? You have an affection of the soul, right? You gotta drain it. Same with unanswered questions. Same with unresolved complaints. You gotta drain the thing. You gotta let God know, and you gotta pour out your complaint. Why have you made me this way? I don't like it. I don't know how to handle it. I'm stuck. I don't know. And you take those complaints that are real and you pour them out before God. But if you're going to look to the Lord, you got to make sure you don't do all the talking. You also have to come to a point where you just stop and listen. Let God speak to your heart. Let Him speak to you through His Word. Allow Him to speak to you, and then you take His Word and you meditate on it. I love Psalm 1. It says, "Blessed is a man, blessed is a woman, who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight, her delight is in the law of the Lord, and on His law she meditates day and night." So you got to get into this thing. And then even Psalm 139, 13 through 15. A person ought to memorize this text. It is so profound. "For you formed my inward parts." You did it. "You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." And you're just walking around saying what God has already said. And you start to agree with God. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. Oh, and that's the work you do. So you pour out your complaint. You pour out your heart. And you let Him pour in His thoughts. And you take this thing to the Lord. Do this and keep doing this, and I believe this will help you accept who God made you to be. Soak in the truth. It will make a difference. So here are some of the things I think that we as a church can do to help those who are going through these transgender feelings, gender dysphoria. How do we help? How do we minister? Because this is our day. This is our generation, and we need to talk about and think about how best to approach this matter. Number one, I would say provide safe places for dialogue. Gender dysphoria is very isolating. You just imagine having to tell or wanting to tell somebody and then not knowing how they would receive it. We're going to be rejected, and is it going to be weird? I know it's weird or different at least, and so we isolate. We pull back. We don't want to talk about it because it's just. And people should not be shamed for having feelings. Feelings are feelings. They're not like necessarily right or wrong. They can be based on right or wrong things, but feelings are just what they are. Right? And they're real. They need to be processed. We need to stand with people, listen to people, cry with people, pray with people, walk with people and know it might take a long time to get them to where they want to be. It's kind of like untangling a knot. It doesn't take long something to get knotted up, but there's a knot in you. Sometimes it's most helpful when you got two people trying to, just the other day, my son and I were trying to untangle an extension cord that get badly knotted. And it took two people. And sometimes those things take a long time to figure out, And sometimes you might not get it on the first time you talk to somebody. You might have to spend a whole year or several years just trying to sort things out. But if we stay in the game, they have the support, and they should have that support from the church. That people express their feelings. Maybe even act out on their feelings without shaming. Providing safe places for dying. So number 2, I would say, and I think this is important, remove unhelpful stereotypes. This is big. Stereotypes are kind of arbitrary. Boys are supposed to play with trucks. Girls are supposed to play with dolls. Women are supposed to keep the house. Men are supposed to landscape the yard. Who says? Well, American society has told us that. All right? So we expect people to live in the blue box, and we expect people to live in the pink box. But there's all kinds of men and all kinds of women. And just because a guy has some quiet or sensitive personality traits, or he likes to cook or he likes to sew, maybe he has a little foot over in the pink box. There are no such boxes, but the stereotype, the stereotypical effeminate traits. What if he can't have a foot over there? Maybe he thinks he just belongs over there. So we need to remove these arbitrary, time-bound, culture-bound, because these things, the feelings aren't wrong, it's the stereotypes that are wrong. A guy that likes to cook and sew, that's perfectly acceptable. Think about Jacob and Esau in the Bible. Esau is a stereotypical guy, rough and burly, outdoorman, a hunter, hairy, he hangs out with dad. He chops wood. That's that's Esau. That's a stereotypical dude. And then you got Jacob over here, smooth skinned. He hangs out. He's a dweller of tents. He does the stew. It feels kind of just But honestly, I look at those two guys. I gotta put them over to Jacob, man. I don't like hunting or outdoors activity necessarily. I'd rather be inside reading books and digging my toes in the carpet. It's just comfortable. It's just indoors. That's me. I'm a dweller of tents. So am I effeminate? I don't know. There's many ways to be a man. And then we need to allow people to have different temperaments, personalities, not trap them into a pink or a blue box. There's all kinds of women. There's tomboys. There's those ones who like to take charge and be assertive. Some don't like to go shopping, makeup and glamour and all that. That's okay, right? Think about Deborah out of the Bible. She's not hanging out with the chick. She's hanging out with the dude. She's going to war. Man, there's another lady in the Bible. Her name is Jael. She took a spike and drove it through the head of a man. These aren't any less females because they do some of those things. There's all kinds of ways to be a man. There's all kinds of ways to be a female. And in the church, this ought to be a place where a person can explore personality and life without having to live in a stereotypical box. In the church, we ought to value all kinds of temperaments, even if they don't fit within our gender stereotypes. So, how does a person decide what gender they are? You got to look to the design. You got to look to the body. And how does a person accept what gender they are. They got to look to the designer. They got to look to the Lord. They got to pour out their complaint. They got to receive his words of affirmation. It's okay to be who you are. I did this on purpose. And I know what I'm doing. I'm going to have Adrian come up here. I'm going to finish with this thought. Many of us know people who are struggling with this. People who have transitioned. People who have engaged in gotten married, transgender marriage. I mean, it's like, and you think, have they gone too far? Does God give up on anybody? And the answer is no. Going back to the Psalm 139, this is a critical passage in the Bible regarding identity. Check this out. It says here, speaking of, have I gone too far? Has my dad gone too far? Has my cousin gone too far? How about my grandchild? Have they gone too far? Listen to this. This says, where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. I look at some of these stories of people who have gone off into transgender marriage, they've reassigned their sex. Have they gone too far? And that tells me no. Even there, my right hand will hold you. And God is right in the midst of it all, as maybe even freakish and bizarre it seems from the outside. God is in the middle of that community. And he's still active. And he's still wooing. And he's still lavish with his love and with his grace. We're going to finish this morning with this last song, The Goodness of God. This is just an introduction to this conversation, and I hope that we continue to talk about other ways we can be a real good in this community. But we need to be convinced ourselves of the goodness of God and the grace of God that is lavish. So let's stand and sing this last song as a reminder to ourselves about the nature of our